Awesome. Welcome everyone again to LA Forward Action's Relational Organizing Training. This is the fifth and final training in our campaign skills series that we've had going on for the past few weeks. So today we're going to be talking about this concept of how we organize people that we know, right? So we're going to be applying a lot of the same conceptual framework that we use in campaigns to get out the vote, to mobilize people, to inspire them around an issue. And we're going to talk about how to do that same thing with people that we know. And this is a really useful skill, whether we're running for neighborhood council, whether we are working on a presidential campaign or a ballot initiative. So it has really broad application. I put in my email here if you want to follow up with me, and I always include a picture of me and my doggy because that's, you know, that's my person in the world, or my creature. And he's over there. Hopefully he won't make too much noise in the background. So feel free to take a screenshot and follow up with me if you have questions. Feel free to reach out. And I can also share these slides as well. So just a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about tonight in today's training. We're going to talk about what relational organizing is. We're going to talk about kind of the who and the how of relational organizing. So who we reach out to. Yes, I agree, RD, about animals joining. That is the rule. They have to be introduced. And we'll also talk about the how. So, some really common and effective methods for mobilizing people in this relational manner. And we'll also talk about what mobilizing means, right? What are some of those organizing asks that we can ask our friends or family or our, fellow church or temple or other faith community members or people from our gym, whoever it is that we're trying to activate politically. We can talk about what we're actually asking them to do. Maybe it's voting, maybe it's knocking on doors, maybe it's wearing a t-shirt that says climate change is real, whatever the ask might be, right? And then we're going to talk about some do's and don'ts, just things I've learned over the years in different campaigns about how to approach this tactic and this topic. And I'm certainly open to questions or problems to solve. If you have any scenarios, if you have any scenarios that come to mind, I'm curious to hear how you see this applying to your organizing work in LA Forward or elsewhere. Always curious to hear about that. All right, so let's talk about what relational organizing is. So relational organizing is basically just talking to people that you know, full stop. And it isn't necessarily, small talk, talking to them about the weather. It's a very specific type of organizing conversation with someone that you know. And it's mobilizing them to take action, right? So in a typical political conversation with a friend or partner or mother, father, brother, sister, etc., dog sitter, book club member, whatever, pastor, we're not necessarily mobilizing that person to take action, right? We're often, we're airing grievances or saying like, oh, work is like this, why does my coworker always, smack their lips when they're eating yogurt, right? We're airing grievances. We might be talking about the president. We might be talking, oh, here's my dog. Hey, buddy. He's coming to visit. We might be talking about why is there so much trash in our neighborhood? We might be complaining. We might be talking about what we like. An organizing conversation is very different from that. An organizing conversation actually asks us to have a particular agenda. So in these organizing conversations, we're not manipulating someone. I think it's really important to mention it's okay to have an agenda in a conversation, right? It's like organizing is all about asking people to do things that they may not know they want to do, but they will want to do, right? I'm just going to put my AirPods in so that in case my dog barks, just give me 1 second. Just going to get these connected. Can you hear me okay? Fantastic.
So for instance, if we are going to a phone bank, let's say a neighborhood council phone bank, like one of the ones that LA Forward hosts, and we have one coming up on April 15th. Maybe we want to get a friend to join, and maybe they don't know that they want a phone bank yet, right? We're not tricking them. We're engaging them in something that we find meaningful. That I bet if we have shared values, if we're friends, or if we go to the same church, or read the same books in book club, I bet we have some shared values and some shared concerns about what we see in the world and in our city. So I gave some examples of what taking action could mean. It could mean voting. It could mean gathering signatures. Could mean knocking doors with you. Does anyone have any questions about this definition of what relational organizing is?
I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because it's difficult for me sometimes to differentiate, because I've had people come to me trying to organize me into their group when what they want to do is dictate to me. And you're saying that there are ways of having that conversation without having that happen. Is that accurate?
Yeah, let me make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. So RD, you're saying that when people come to you to organize you into something, it could feel condescending or off-putting in a way, and yeah, totally. Do you have any examples of ways that it can be off-putting, like, things that people do that are a no-no in your book?
It usually, I have no problem when someone asks me a question as long as they accept my answer.
Yeah.
And the point where I feel condescended to, or whatever the wordage that you used is when I give an answer and they try and talk around the answer to talk me into another position.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's a great example, and I think if we are on the organizer end of that, so if we are the person trying to, activate, Irvina or activate anyone else to do something, um, then we want to look at it as we have to sort of like calibrate the ask. So we have to think about what we're asking that person to do, right? And we want to make sure we're not framing it as a favor, right? They're not doing something for us. They're doing something for the greater good, right? That's actually going to benefit them because it feels good. Although, of course, it's not really about them, right? It's about a sense of solidarity and shared, um, shared drive for justice or motivation for social justice. Um, so for instance, I'm trying to, I've had all sorts of organizing conversations where I've asked someone to do something that was actually much bigger than was appropriate for the situation. So for instance, there have been times where I've asked volunteers in campaigns, hey, would you be comfortable hosting a phone bank? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I've never done that before. And you know what? Their response, like you're saying, RD, it's totally legitimate, right? And so what this can mean is that maybe I didn't really assess the scenario or that volunteer correctly. And I don't mean assess in a negative way. I just mean think about their strengths and maybe what their challenges have been, the way we would with any friend or our coworker. So maybe the right ask is, hey, will you come to this phone bank with me and we'll sit next to each other and hang out? Um, and we'll get tacos and a beer afterwards, and we can talk about how it went and whether it's something we want to do again, right? Like adding in that social aspect, not like as a reward, but just making it an event, right? And you're doing it with them because the best organizing ask, similar to if you're a PE teacher, right? And you're saying like, I wouldn't ask you to do 50 push-ups if I can't do 50 push-ups, right? I would never ask someone to do phone banking that I wouldn't do myself, right? I think I've gotten away from your question a little bit, but does that make sense to you too about kind of calibrating the ask and thinking about what's appropriate for the scenario?
Yes, it did. And the sub stuff that was behind it. So you honed in on that and picked it up. Thank you.
It makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So I wanted to share this. This is from a study on the 2018 primary, which, as you may know, had record turnout, not just in California, but all over the country. In some places more than others, certainly, but record turnout in particular with young people who turned out to vote. This study was on relational organizing techniques, and they found an 8.3 percentage point increase in the likelihood of someone turning out to vote if they got a text from a friend. So basically, there are different ways to do texting for campaigns, right? So, for instance, if if I'm working for a city council candidate and I want to send 5,000 texts, I could do that in 15 minutes easily, right? I just go click, 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 right? Send a text to Artie, send a text to Hannah, send a text to Joe, send a text to Bob, bam, 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 bam. That only has a 0.29% increase in someone's likelihood to vote. So exponentially smaller than this relational approach, whereby RD is getting a text from someone that she knows from book club or from the Y or from her faith community or what have you, right? Her neighbor. So it's 8.3% may sound small, but when we talk about campaigns and we talk about what's effective, it's actually quite large. So when we think about something like phone banking, which phone banking is a really common tactic that campaigns use, right? Almost every campaign is going to use phone banking, whether it's manual calls or a dialer system. Phone banking only has a like 1 or 2% what's the right word to use? The amount that phone banking can increase turnout is actually quite low, and it doesn't mean it's not worth doing, but it just means that in comparison to something like a relational organizing approach, even through something as simple as a text, right? Texting 25 of your friends every week to make sure they turn out to vote for a city council candidate, even that has quite a large impact compared with other methods. I'm just going to grab a bone for my dog and I'll be right back momentarily. Hey, buddy, I'm going to grab you a treat. You ready for a treat? All right, we got it. Here you go, bud. Maybe he'll come by and he'll be introduced in a second. He's very personable, but he's had a long day in the sun. Okay, so moving right along. Any questions about how effective relational organizing is or why we do it?
You're doing good.
Thanks, Urbina. I think another way to think about relational organizing is to think about what are the pitfalls of traditional organizing. So if we look at traditional, non-relational organizing, it's basically talking to strangers and having thousands and potentially hundreds of thousands or millions of conversations with them in order to change the electorate, mobilize them to vote, mobilize them to get signatures to put a ballot measure on the ballot, something like that. One of the main pitfalls is the obvious, right? They don't know us. Why should they trust some stranger at their door? Maybe they find us personable and they like us, and that's great. But think about how it feels when someone knocks on your door, right? They might be catching you in the middle of something. You might have a toddler tugging on your pant leg, like asking for a snack. If it's someone that you know at your door or someone that you know on the phone or sending you a text, that's different, right? So there's many reasons why it's more effective. Also thinking about values, right? So on this list of who we can reach out to, I added other parents in your child's class, right? So maybe One, time you could talk to people about a political issue would be when you're picking your kids up from school and you're waiting that 10 minutes for them to get out of art class or whatever. You could ask them, what do you think about what's going on with public school funding in our district? Does it worry you as much as it worries me? Right? Starting those conversations with people whom share values with you, right? Because they're parents too. And, you know, as you know, whether you're a parent or not, your kids are number one. Hey, buddy, no need to bark. um, other people to reach out to, family, of course, neighbors. I put coworkers. I think that can be dicey. It depends on the job. It depends on the situation. It depends on how long you've known them. I think there's lots of situations where you can connect challenges that are happening in your workplace. Maybe if you're in a union or if you're not in a union and that poses some challenges, where you can connect those things to political issues to help mobilize people and organize them around those issues. Okay. So let's talk about some tactics. So, I think I'm sort of making the assumption here that we're thinking about relational organizing in terms of electoral campaigns. And when I say electoral campaigns, I mean electing a political candidate for office, whether that's city council or president or neighborhood council. But these tactics are also useful for engaging people in a particular issue. So I know, RD, you mentioned housing, right? Is that a particular passion area for you?
Yes, it is huge.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much need. It's, I'm sure folks have heard about what's been going on at Echo Park Lake, which is, I live just blocks away from there. This real crucible of tensions going on. There's so many different things to talk about when it comes to engaging people in issues like housing, especially in LA. It's so visible, the juxtaposition between homelessness and wealth, and security and comfort that we all deserve. So anyways, going back to these tactics, two of the really key ones are friend to friend texting or calling. So that would be manually or mass texting people that you know. So people that you're personally identifying as people to activate. And you could do that manually. So manually meaning sending one text at a time. Or you can use an app. A lot of these apps do require funding, but some are more inexpensive than others, and some are free as well. A couple examples are Reach and Outvote. A lot of them have vote in the names. And what these apps allow you to do is connect your phone's contacts, your address book, and basically check boxes. So yes, I would like to text RD. Yes, I would like to text Irvina. And it allows you to customize the message as well, so that you're not sending the exact same message to your mother or your old coworker or your uh, you know ex-girlfriend or whatever it might be, whoever you choose to contact, right? Your friend versus your mom, etc. um, and what I really like about apps like this is, people can do them on their own time, right? A lot of different volunteering approaches like phone banking and like canvassing require you to have, a 2 or 3 hour block of time that lots of people just don't have. And, you know, that shouldn't preclude them from volunteering for a campaign and working in solidarity with other people in a movement. And so technology like this allows you to spend 10 minutes at a time contacting a list of 20 friends, or half an hour making 5 or 10 phone calls to people that you know from church. So it's meeting you where you're at, right? You could do it in the waiting room, at a doctor's appointment. You could do it while at your kid's little league game, and so on and so forth. So I really, really like apps like that. It's also good for groups, maybe younger people in particular, but honestly, across the board, people's uh, inability to answer their phones. I won't say inability. Their lower likelihood of answering their phones these days makes texting a good approach. Um, Another approach that's great for relational organizing is virtual house parties. And eventually, hopefully sooner rather than later, we can also do these in person for organizing. So, a house party is basically just bringing people together in a casual way to try to bring them into something. So, it could be a, housing themed house party, right? So, maybe RD invites over 10 friends or 5 friends for a potluck, or a virtual potluck or virtual happy hour or something, and asks everyone to, hang out, grab a drink and a snack, and then have a seat and go around in a circle and share something they love about living in LA and something they dislike, right? And maybe RD is able to connect that really seamlessly to the issue of housing, right? Um, Maybe there's house parties that are geared towards fundraising, which of course is one important way of building power as a social justice movement and power as organizers. There's house parties that are geared towards getting out the vote. So for instance, you could have a house party a few days before an election date and fill out your ballots together. I know there were LA Forward members who did that this past November election cycle. Um, the key thing here with these house parties is, like the organizing conversation that I mentioned, there's a particular ask, right? So while they are fun and, they should be fun and casual and informal, and it is people that you like, um, you want to have a game plan. So that's why I mentioned doing something like the icebreaker or storytelling. Approach of asking people to share stories and then connecting them to the issue that you're trying to activate them on. Um, because you want to have a particular agenda in mind in terms of making that accessible ask. So, for instance, if your ask is for them to attend a phone bank, maybe you want to ask people to share a story of a positive conversation they've had about politics, right? And then you're able to connect those stories to phone banking and say, phone banking is really just a series of conversations. And it might seem scary, but what's really cool about it is it allows you to have these really positive conversations and shared memories with other people who are calling for the same thing. And then you might say, um, what would be really powerful, what would enable us to win this city council campaign with this candidate who, like us, is a fellow teacher, let's say, or who, like us, is a fellow dad, if that were the case, is if we banded together and said, we're going to make 100,000 phone calls and I'm going to show you how we're going to do it. And maybe you sketch out a map and you say, okay, if we, or not a map, a diagram, you say, okay, if we have 20 phone banks, no one of us can host 20 phone banks, but if we have 10 of us here and each of us helps recruit one person, it's almost like a pyramid scheme, right? A lot of organizing sounds like a pyramid scheme or sales. But it's the reality, right? That a lot of times these things have to be scaled up in order to be effective. So you're not just asking people to attend one phone bank, you might be asking them to bring a friend to the next house party. I'll stop for a second just to see if folks have any thoughts about these tactics. Have either of you done friend to friend texting or calling before, or virtual house parties?
I haven't personally done them, but I have been approached by organizations who utilize the same technique to put their things out. So I've experienced it on the receiving end. And I mean, that's my limited extent of it.
And I'm curious, how did it come across to you when you were on the receiving end? What was that like?
Well, I'm going to be very honest, because I'm not the person that usually responds to this stuff, and rarely do I.
Yeah.
You can go trust issues or whatever, however it works, whatever terminology. But the thing that generally rankles me is if a person doesn't, like I said before, doesn't take my answer. I mean, I'm willing for them to make the ask, because if you don't ask, you don't get. And who knows, I may say yes. And if I say yes, cool.
Yeah.
But the people who come across slimy or smeary, or I'm not going to accept your response. I mean, even an I don't know can be fiddled with a little bit. Is that a definite no, I don't know, or,
Yeah.
however you want to ask it. But when they just keep going because they're going to barrel over me and get their way no matter what, because they're going to talk around me until they talk me to their point, it's like I'm dealing with a snake oil merchant here, and I don't care how they're presenting themselves. And unfortunately, because I have a small area of friends, I don't take personal calls. So texting has been the method that most people get through to me. So I think if my response is, generally, I would say no. If someone showed up my door, I wouldn't even open it. I would just say, go away. But that's me.
Yeah.
So I have to struggle to understand that other people think this is a normal everyday thing. And I'm starting from a very different point of the curve than most people are, because I'm usually not responding. But I do think that it's valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just going to turn the light on. There we go. Yeah, I hear you. And I think sometimes where those difficult or unsuccessful organizing conversations come from on the organizer's part, so on the part of the other person, RD, is I think a lack of confidence. If they feel like they can't be effective without, kind of pushing the other person, you know, I think that's lack of confidence, and they, it is something that takes work, and um just like social skills for a lot of us, like they're not necessarily intuitive, it's like uh I'm even thinking like when I was a kid and my mom telling me okay, when you go over to someone's house, you can't just open up their fridge like it's your fridge at home. Whereas I'm as a kid, I'm like, but that's what I do at home, and I'm at their home, so isn't it a home? So anyways, I think when it comes to those organizing conversations, um it's so important for people to feel like they can practice and feel like they're calibrating the ask appropriately, so that they're not putting someone in an uncomfortable spot, um like maybe you've been put in. What about you, Irvina? Have you done these tactics before?
I was gonna say that you're doing such a great job. I'm learning a lot. I really appreciate this.
Of course. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, this is great. I can see in this, certain things that translate. So I've worked in nonprofits, and I'm thinking of like, you're at a cocktail party and it's so fun, and then it stops, and someone like is like, we brought you all here today because and like some of the best events are things that you don't think are events. Like I've even been to churches where you're like, oh, this is great music, this is a performance, and then, oh, by the way, and you're like, oh, okay. So it's just as it's fun, and then you're like kind of, I don't want to say, I guess it is kind of like a bait and switch, but it's like, yeah, there's a reason you're here. And I very well could see how it would be easy to have a potluck, like you said, and say, big reason I asked you guys all to come tonight is, because I care about LA, I care about housing.
Yeah.
So I could really see how that could translate. I do see also things that haven't worked in the past. Like I haven't done necessarily phone banking, but I have done direct calls. Like I remember the one about, what was it? The petition in Venice for the 150 unit buildings, and I think it was through United Way, and they asked us to, send out texts reminding people to sign the petition. Excuse me. And I went to like people I knew in Venice, but people who I didn't know that well, like, hey, sign this. But I could see how an app where you can, change it for what you say to your mom to somebody else, because I know I can feel things when it's copy pasted.
Yeah, totally.
Effective. But yeah, I think this is all great information and definitely applicable.
Awesome. Great to hear that. These are, Irvina brought up the apps. These are some examples of what this can look like. And it sounds like you maybe have some exposure to this. The one on the far right, I believe, is Reach, which is kind of one of the fanciest. Actually, I think the middle is that one as well. So, it says which message would you like to start with? And it allows you to edit it. And it allows you to tailor it based on kind of the category or your assessment of that person, right? So if they're a friend and family member, or friend or family member, and you don't really know where they stand, you craft a certain message. If you know this person is a strong voter, you craft a particular message. If they're a professional contact, maybe you frame it in a different way. And then I also love they have the kind of like cringe or awkward emoji, like haven't talked in a while. It doesn't mean you can't reach out to that person. And actually, I have found through doing political work that, it can be a really cool way to strike up a conversation you haven't talked with someone you haven't talked with in a while, because if it's someone you were friendly with in the past, you probably have some shared values. Maybe you did other activism work in the past together, or maybe you were in school together, whatever it might be. So I think it can actually be kind of fun to be like, oh, how's it going? I'm working with this organization, LA Forward. Here's what I care about, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's pretty neat. Another great example of these types of apps is the Burn app, which we used during the Bernie Sanders campaign. And the cool thing about that is it allowed you to add people into the app, and then basically you would add their name and their age and email and address, I think, and then it would look them up in the voter file, which is public information. So it would match them. So if you put in Hannah Kessel, my age and address and so on, it would match me to my address, so that if you're asking someone, hey, do you support healthcare for all, or do you support this housing initiative in Venice, for instance, do you support 150 units of housing, whatever it might be, you have that person's voter information, so okay, we've talked to 100,000 people in West LA, now we need to talk to 100,000 people in East LA, for example. And it also gives you a sense of who the best people to do that follow-up are, right? That the best people to actually remind folks to vote are people that they know, not strangers. Yeah. So yeah, I really like these examples, really, really clever. Okay. I think we will be able to wrap up by 8, so that'll work well for your schedule, RD. Some do's and don'ts around relational organizing. Do provide relational scripts for outreach. I think sometimes, on campaigns I've worked on or organizing work I've done, people assume that because you're talking to a friend or family member, or someone that the conversation is just going to be easy and it's going to write itself. I have found that personally to not be the case at all. I think a script really helps, and then you can edit it. Whether that's on the phone, you customize it a little bit. Maybe you ask how their dog is doing or whatever, and then launch into the conversation. Or you're able to edit it in the app. I do think providing that skeleton of a script is extremely useful. And like I said a few minutes back, not all of this is intuitive to people, right? I think it makes a lot of sense once you know the concept of talking to people that you know and mobilizing them around a particular issue or candidate. But I think in a certain sense, it's not intuitive at all, because a lot of us actually avoid political conversations with people we're close with because we know it could be tense, or because it has been tense in the past. So there's, we're worried about it blowing up. We're worried that we maybe don't know how to go about it. So people actually do need those tools. I think it's also really useful to set, I put in specific, measurable, achievable goals, almost like those SMART goals, realistic, time sensitive, for your own relational organizing. So, for instance, calling 10 friends from your faith community, whatever it might be, or if you're, having a virtual house party with friends for a city council campaign, maybe you're all sitting there and you're going to write down 20 people and you're going to text all of them, right? And having a shared spreadsheet so you can see these are the 20 people, excuse me, these are the 20 people that I'm going to reach out to, and these are the 20 people that my sister's going to reach out to, and so on, right? And you can really see your impact get multiplied by the fact that everyone is doing that work, that you're not alone in it. And the what would contrast with that specific goal would be just saying, okay, we're all going to go home and reach out to some friends, right? It's much better to say something specific. Can we count on you to reach out to 10 friends by Friday? And maybe they can't do it by Friday. Maybe they can set their own goal. I'm going to reach out to 10 friends by next Tuesday, give themselves a little more time. And then maybe you follow up on Friday and say, hey, just wanted to check in and see how the outreach is going, right? Um, I added that in, making sure you do follow up, getting feedback about how it's going. That's just a good practice for organizing in general. I think this is really huge in terms of don'ts, not being afraid to ask people to go outside their comfort zone just a bit. I think sometimes these organizing conversations can be difficult. They shouldn't be uncomfortable to a big degree, but they might feel uncomfortable in the sense of you're you're asking someone to do something that you wouldn't normally ask, and it may not go perfectly, but you're getting practice and you're going to gain confidence, and you can bring that to every campaign and every organizing project you do. Don't be afraid to think creatively about who you reach out to. Your gym friends, your book club. I keep bringing up those examples because those apply to me. I have gym and book friends. Your college roommate, your you know your exes, your family members, whoever it might be, right? And then just to emphasize again, don't forget that these tactics may not come organically to people. Always explaining why it's effective to contact people that um, and what numerical success, like what the data shows about doing this for campaigns, because people get persuaded by different things, and that can be really uh, a really useful deciding factor. And that is it. I'll take questions, feedback. This gives you a little time, RD, before your housing group meeting. But I'm curious to hear any questions that you have.
Yeah, this is great. I'm curious. I agree. The graphics are very nice. I'm curious about, like, say in those conversations when people don't agree, or become combative.
Yeah.
What is your feedback for that?
Yeah. So can you give me an example of what you have in mind? You mean like you bring up a political issue and they don't agree with you?
Yeah, and I would even say, I mean, aside from phone baking, I think there's like a little, I think you kind of addressed it at the beginning actually, but kind of like the breadcrumbs of it, like kind of what do you talk, kind of like you're starting like a warm pitch to people. You talk about housing, like what do you like about LA? What do you not like about LA? You're getting people, you're with like-minded people. I find for myself, that, I mean, I'll just give it for instance. I have a couple people who I think just because of the pandemic, people I'm not I don't hang out that much with, but they've
Yeah.
reached out to me, and they tend to have very different political beliefs. Like one's a libertarian and one's I'd say
Yeah.
he's liberal, but he was very anti-Gascon. And so he, you know, just the other day
Interesting.
sent me like 3 articles about Gascon, you know, kind of like effing up or whatever. And I haven't even responded yet because I'm kind of annoyed by it.
Yeah.
But I just think like these are great opportunities because these people are not, you know, it's not preaching to the choir. Like I have friends who hands down are, you know, will sign and petition and do anything I ask them to do. But
Yeah.
these people, you know, I think they're kind of you know, they're good opportunities to at least sway things. And I, you know, I've had people sway my opinions, but that was
Yeah.
from people I loved, like yelling at me. I don't think yelling at these people is going to be effective. But
Yeah.
I was curious from your opinion, like, because I think it's the right opportunity. It's over text, you know, it's a warm lead, and I would like them to
Yeah.
become more progressive.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, I think that that example you gave is a really good one. Someone's already sending you articles. I think, you know, if you're like me, sometimes that can feel like they're trying to provoke you if they know that you're in disagreement. But what is really positive about that opportunity to talk to them is that that's someone who's already very engaged politically. um, so it's sort of a different conversation than a conversation we might have with someone who doesn't vote, right? And neither one is better than the other. There's so many reasons why people aren't engaged. You know, there isn't effort made to engage with them. There isn't effort made to teach them about how to vote. Um, but I think with someone like that, um, I I sort of use the same rules that I would apply to phone banking, which is basically no arguing. So in my political conversations, I try to spend as little time arguing as possible. And it's really hard. It's kind of like a game. But the way I look at it is as soon as I'm arguing with that person, I've sort of already lost, and it's just not a great use of my organizing time. So I think one way to approach a conversation like that is like, hey, I would love to share with you some of the stuff I'm working on at LA Ford or elsewhere. What, you know, neighborhood council, a campaign, whatever. Maybe not Gascon related. You know, just in that instance, I'll um, and just kind of hear their thoughts, and just allow the conversation to develop organically, and maybe just allow that disagreement about that particular person to just be just for now, and have some conversations with them, where you're sharing what you're passionate about politically outside of that. Does that make sense? And then you're kind of feeling them out. And again, it's not like we're manipulating them, but it's just it's talking around that subject in a way where you can kind of build up a political rapport that's positive, that's without arguing or debating,
Mhm.
that's just sharing and listening to one another. It's hard, especially when you know that that point of disagreement exists, but that would be my approach. The other thing too is you don't have to focus on those people. You could focus on people who are already involved, but who could be leveled up to be leaders in this work. So for instance, if you're in like an issue team in LA Forward and you're wanting to level someone up to be a leader in it, like how can you make escalating organizing asks to therefore help that person build confidence that they need to be a leader? Just some thoughts.
Yeah, I like
Um,
that. That's great. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say I want to be cognizant of RDs leaving in a minute. Any other questions? And then of course we'll have the recording if you want to share it with anybody as well.
Didn't. Okay, the computer's acting up.
Oh no.
I see the recording, and yet it didn't occur to me. That's so exciting because I am the kind of person who has to go through
Yeah,
and
totally. Me
re-listen
too.
and reread and all of that stuff. So that is exciting. And on that note, I'm going to leave because it's now time for me to go to the other meeting. Thank you both. I'm so
For sure.
appreciative of this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, RD. Great to have you.
Nice to
I'll
see you,
go
Artie.
ahead and I'll stop recording. Let's see.